John.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So today we wanted to talk a little bit about. There's been a bit of a buzz out there, and then the couple of news articles you may have heard about zombie loans in California. So we kind of wanted to start with just the basics, John. I know this is second nature to you, but what's a zombie loan? What does that mean?
Well, if you look at the news, there's a broad aspect of zombie debt that we're not going to discuss today, but it could be credit cards, anything that's being revived by bill collectors after, say, the statute of limitations is run, is sometimes characterized as zombie debt. But specifically for California, I think today there's two types of zombie debt, and I think we should only address one. One would be where the statute of limitations ran, there's no more lien on the property, and I think that could be more formally handled by anybody with a cease and desist letter and a lawyer. And we can certainly do that, but to me, it's not as complex. So maybe we'll discuss it some other time. But I thought, after talking with you, because we were talking about yesterday, people thinking about selling their property when they have low equity. I think other people who are thinking about selling their property and are aware they once had a second lien on their property, or they find out, unfortunately, after they've started to sell the property, they have a second lien on the property and they have to deal with it. That would be the zombie debt we're addressing.
And that was an article I recently read, that exact scenario, that people are going to sell their home. Title is finding this lien from, 2009, 2010, 2012. And they really, when they think about it, they know what it's from, but they had no idea it was out there.
Right. And I would say anybody who's ever had a second, and they're still living in the home, they had problem debt years ago, and they may have come to upsidedownrealestate.com. They may have talked to us. They may have talked to other lawyers, but they were told before they wanted to, let's say, walk away, they're like, if you stop paying on your mortgage, on your first mortgage, and that mortgage forecloses, then this second, especially if they were a recourse second, could come after you for the money. So those people, whether in consultation with a lawyer or because they just figured out on their own, they just continue to pay on their first mortgage, which was the right move. But they had this second that, let's say the statute of limitations ran after 4 years. They're like, wow, I can breathe a sigh of relief because they cannot come after me for the deficiency or the money contractually based on the contract. And that was true. And for many people, it was a very, very good move at the time. But unfortunately, we're not sure that debt really went away. And we've had some California laws that addressed it last July. It became a rule, and it's trying to recharacterize this debt that's still around as giving courts leverage to basically strip the lien away. And it'd be called a quiet title action, but stripping the lien is, I think, what people understand. Most people understand. And when you strip a lien, let's bring it back. I jumped over an important part. The issue is that most realtors and most people advising, if they weren't attorneys, did not recognize there's two parts of this scenario. There's a second not only has a contract to pay the loan back, but when it was done in relation to a home, the second would almost always get a lien against the property. And that lien can sit on the property there's like various rules depending on the type, but it's 10 years after the lien might have matured, or it could even be 60 years before it would go away by operational law. So most people are not in the zone of time where the lien itself would go away. The lien is still on your property. If you had go ahead.
I was going to say, so in that case, like that goes back to yesterday, we talked about getting a bad approval letter that perhaps in that case maybe relinquished them of the debt, or they thought they were, but it didn't relinquish the lien.
Perfect question. Yes. And that's why you'd want to go back and even look at the time you did. Well, it would be a similar thing, but that lien, in that case, that property would have been sold to be gone. So that would be the type of debt where the zombie's sitting there thinking they still collect. But I would think in most cases, the statute of limitations ran on that, and you could clear that out pretty easily. If you did a short sale, since you're no longer sitting in the property, you don't care about the fact that there was a sold out junior anymore with respect to the lien. You don't have that property to sell anymore. But that sold out junior, the debt collector may be trying to somehow revive the debt that most likely the statute of limitations ran on. If you talk to us, I think we can make them go away rather quickly. I can't even, I'm having trouble thinking of any reason why that second, as we sit here now, and I haven't examined this legally, I wasn't prepared to talk about that, but I can't think of any reason why a second without a lien that's more than 4 years old, where you haven't paid in 4 years, I don't see why they could get that money. I don't even know why they could still harm your credit. I mean, that time was done. And I would seriously consider, if I was being harassed by those people, countersuing them under Fair Debt Collecting Practices Act, California laws, unfair business practices. I would think you could get rid of those guys pretty easily.
The other scenario where somebody kept paying on their first and they let that second go into default, and they're still in the home, this is where the other type of zombie loan is coming from. And just a little backstory on that. When people were in that position, we would often advise that they keep that first. The reason they had to keep that first mortgage current and stay there, when they wanted to usually keep their home. But if they let that go delinquent, then that second could foreclose, could start the process, correct?
Could you repeat it? I have to admit, I was thinking about what I was going to say and not listening to it.
I was just giving a backstory on like why somebody would pay the first and not pay the second.
Yes.
And it was so that second didn't begin foreclosure proceedings. They would just sit there, sold out. There's nothing they could do except wait for this situation. They're coming after you now.
Yeah. And let me tell you why, even as an attorney who's been dealing with this on and off since I first got out of law school, I used to work with, when I first got out of law school, I was defending mortgage brokers who were putting seconds. If you remember back in the early 90s, people loved second trust deeds, and people would pay extra because they didn't have the 20% down. They'd pay extra and pay extra interest. And someone would bring along sometimes they would, that second in there to help them buy the home. Maybe it was called a hard money second, but it was expensive, but people did it. And these trust originators, when the market got soft in 91, these mortgage guys were getting sued because people wanted to go to California and claim fraud and get the fraud recovery to get their money back. And there's usually pretty sophisticated people on the other end too, at least in my trials. And so I was defending brokers, and I used to talk to them all the time. And sometimes people would stop paying, and they're like, well, I don't care if they don't pay because I still got the lien. So sooner or later, these people or their estate is going to want to deal with this property, and I'll get paid, and I will be collecting interest all that time. That second part, I'm not sure that they're allowed to collect interest all that time. But these investors were usually pretty long run oriented and kind of chill. Like they weren't worried. If I can't get the money in the next 4 years, I don't care. I've got this lien protecting me. And so that's it. The theory is people who are putting liens on your property can be pretty relaxed about them, even if you don't pay them, because eventually when someone wants to deal with that, sell that property, that lien will get addressed. The title company will say, oh, you can't sell this property free and clear. You have a lien and you've got to deal with it. So then you're like, well, how do I get in touch with the people who own the lien? And you find out, and you can start negotiating. And that's the problem right now that we want to address. First of all, with the new laws from last July, there's a chance, maybe even a strong chance, in some circumstances, if they haven't talked to you for more than 3 years and the statute of limitations is run, according to the new law that came into effect last July, you could go into, I don't want to estimate the chances because I'm sure it's going to change, because right now there's lawsuits by the lenders they're in court right now arguing that law was unconstitutional, it needs to be changed. But you can leverage the law right now and go into superior court and argue that the lien should be removed. It'd be called a quiet title action. And to me, that's looking like a pretty strong opportunity. If I want to get rid of this lien, I would act soon while that law is still good, because it's some of the best leverage you've had in years. I'm not guaranteeing success, but I'm saying this is a great chance to deal with it. But the very fact you're even thinking about dealing with it means it's a great chance to get them to settle for pennies on the dollar, because that's all they paid in the first place. And they probably won't want to hire lawyers. And if they do, the lawyers can't tell them they're going to win. They'd probably have to say, there's just like, I'm afraid to tell you you're going to win. Their lawyers are going to be afraid to tell them they're going to win. And so we're in this state right now where this would be an excellent time to leverage the law and make those seconds go away. And this is not a hard concept. It's not a novel concept, especially in the beginning of the last mortgage crisis. It's called a short pay, and leveraging law in California and making them do the work in the accounting. They realize they're dealing with a lawyer and they're like, let's stop the pain let's just get it done. And we could and did settle for pennies on the dollar. I think it's an excellent opportunity for someone with a second to do that. What I wanted to also bring up, we didn't get to it, but since I'm talking, I might as well, is you really rather not do that in the context of a sale. That's when the lender knows they've got leverage over you.
Right.
Because you're like, I have a buyer here who I'm under contract with. I'm supposed to give them the house in 30 to 45 days. And I have this loan I have to remove. And that's their strongest pressure point. Super powerful position to be in. You don't want to let them get there. So my advice to anybody who's living in a house that they've had a long time, and they might even forgot the second, but if there's a chance you have a second on the property, do not, I would say don't start the short sale. Talk to title, figure out what your title looks like. And if you have a lien, negotiate that first before you hire a realtor or go under contract. Secondly, let's say you're already with a realtor, but you don't have an offer, make that realtor get a title report today within 24 hours, because you don't want to be under contract and then have to negotiate with the second. I had some other notes. AB 24 became the Civil Code 2924. That's the new law. That gives you a lot of new leverage. You've got statute of limitations leverage. It's quiet title actions have always been real. Oh, I left out bankruptcy is an option for lien stripping too, if I didn't say that. Yeah, I covered what I wanted to cover on that.
So, and just to be clear, when you call any title company, you can ask them for a preliminary title report. They'll run the history. They'll find that lien if it's attached. It's I don't even know if you're planning to sell the home that they'll even charge you for that. You know, that's kind of a first stage. When we take a listing, we ask for a title report just so there's no surprises. You could have IRS, credit issues. You never know if there's been
mechanics liens.
Right. Transfers, interfamily transfers is a big one in California that parents leave it to their kids and nobody told them about that other thing. Solar panels, all kinds of things.
Yes, we thought. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's a good idea to get the title report in the very beginning anyway. But okay. So I've been saying this for years. Always have an out. I realize if you're going to do a short sale, you have to have a long listing agreement, but then have a side agreement, not necessarily in a checkbox, but in writing, signed by the broker. You can get out of that listing agreement at any time. Very important during short sales. If you're not going to be short, you have to get the ability to get out of your contracts at any time if you find these problems. Like, I'm not saying go in and let's say the realtor says, I'm about to do $2,000 of social media marketing and $3,000 of print advertising. I'm going to spend $5,000 on your home. Well, then you say, okay, well, let's get the title. Let's do the things we have to do first before I commit, but don't start spending the money until we commit. And then maybe I'll give you 60 days or 90 days. But don't just walk in there and go, I'm locked in for 6 months to a year. There's too many problems in a market that could be changing quickly. That is definitely unstable and probably going down in some areas. This is not the time to lock in to it never really is, but certainly.
And it happens so often. Like, when you say that's one of the most common calls as a real estate attorney that come into our office just randomly. We don't advertise for that, but they say, how do I get out of this listing agreement for whatever reason?
A reasonable percentage of my listings have come from people who wanted out of contracts at first. And sometimes the brokers win. Like, again, I'm not going to say, like, some of these brokers know their contracts well. And they're like, well, when my agent said that, I could get out of the contract at any time, that meant you could come talk to me and I'd assign a different agent to you. I mean, and I'm a lawyer with a lot of experience. You've sold hundreds of homes. I've trained realtors on how to do multiple offers for car, but these brokers who know their contract, I can't go back and tell my client they're going to win. We can get out. Sometimes they had to wait another month or two. And sometimes they were worried, well, what if they produce an offer? And I'm like, well, that's why you're going to, there's ways to not have to sell your home with those people, but it's very difficult sometimes to get out of the contracts. And so many times realtors say it verbally, you can get out of this at any time. And we've got enough calls where I'm telling you, it's common enough that brokers already have their script and now they're going to defend it right away. So
and I've noticed too over the years, like, sometimes the realtor really meant that, but they didn't check with the broker. The broker is the one that actually owns the listing. They run a business. They spend the money. They often won't let somebody out. So You've got to be careful what you sign. Make sure you have an out in there. We generally we put in a clause that people can cancel at any time. Up until we trigger certain. If we go under contract, then you're obligated by the new contract that when your house is sold, you can't just cancel. So there's
a separate contract. That's a separate analysis.
Right. So I think that kind of covers zombie loans, and right now, just to kind of recap that 2424, whatever the other SB code is, that's being litigated. So you have that as strength right now to say, we don't know how this is going to end up. Could be your favor, could be our favor, right?
Yeah, so. and like I know I've reviewed some of my videos lately, and I don't want to sound it's Pollyanna-ish, but that's why we're going to do. I was working on a data and a model to be accurate, but there is a good chance this is probably the time to take care of this, because these lenders are still arguing that their interest rates are going up. And if you look at the numbers, like a $150,000 loan could be 400 or 250 or 300 by now, could be 400 or 500 in the future, because it's 7 or 10% or whatever your numbers are at, probably 7%. It doubles every 7% loan doubles every, what's a mortgage guy say? Every 5 years or 10 years? There's a rule of thumb.
Might be in the middle, right?
Yeah, there's a rule of thumb for 7 years. I don't remember it anymore. But interests are going up. The banks are going to argue they're entitled to the interest. I think there's arguments that they're not, but I think you'd want to solidify that anyway. And so the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act at the moment hasn't been renewed. I mean, it's been renewed all the time in cycles, but it expired December 2025, and it hasn't been renewed yet. So there's a lot of reasons to act now if you're thinking about acting. If you think you'd like to sell your home, if you'd like to get, even though you're like, it's in the past, I don't know what's going on, well, that's even better, because they're probably not even going to show up. So, you might be able to extinguish it for a filing fee and some lawyer's time. If they are around, a good negotiation could probably extinguish it. And then you'd want to make sure that the lien removal process is done accurately. But there's we could go into it. There's multiple reasons to do it right now while you have a law that could be useful. I mean, it's not like we're going to walk into court. The debt buyer's attorney is going to say, well, that law is being litigated, we can't go right now. I mean, that's going to be their argument, but there are still statute of limitations arguments. There's equity, there's latches. You have lots of reasons why a quiet title action could work. So that's lots of leverage to get them to settle.
Good to know. And also, so people at home, you may know about this. You may be like always wondering about that. That's where you go with the title search to see if it's still attached to you in any way. You may have gotten a letter. If you get a letter, much like we said yesterday, don't throw it in a drawer and put your head in the sand. You just make a quick phone call, figure out what your options are. Time is never on your side with these kind of issues.
Good point. And if it's just starting and you want to work with us, there's also AB 130 is the time limits and all that. AB 2924 also, or it says you can stop a foreclosure if you do it right with a listing agreement. And if you've got plenty of time, like we don't even have to start litigation. It would be a lot less expensive. You want to send it to the right people, but you can put a stop to a foreclosure because of 2924 and there's all sorts of bill of rights. The homeowner's bill of rights avoids dual tracking. So there's a lot of things people can do. There's the AB 130 and the new law that was signed last July, AB 2424 that was signed. I should have looked at my notes more last January. A lot of good laws for your defense right now.
All right, John. Well, thanks for covering that topic for us. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys again soon.
All right.